Welcome to the Family Business Audiocast on LinkedIn. I am R. Adam Smith, creator of this audiocast series. As an entrepreneur, investor, founder, investment banker, and board leader the last 25 years, I'm fortunate for my many experiences within the family firm industry. A warm thank you to our live audience on LinkedIn today and for those listening in the future. A brief comment on why I created this broadcast. Private companies are a passion of mine, having grown up in a family of entrepreneurs and having engaged for 2 decades in deals, strategic transformations, investments, and boards with an array of fascinating family enterprises, family firms, and family offices. I founded this series to offer a useful platform for listeners to hear from veterans, academics, and leaders in the vast family firm ecosystem. Whether you're a family business owner, building, running, or advising a family office, or just expanding your family office activities, I hope these conversations are useful and enlightening. And now it's time to turn our attention to our accomplished guests on today's episode. Today, I'm very pleased to host Kim Eddleston on the show. Kim, it's great to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm just going to brag about you for a bit and talk about your background. Kim has a rare combination of academic rigor and lived experience and is a leading authority on family business dynamics, governance, and entrepreneurship. Kim is the Schulze Distinguished Professor of Entrepreneurship and Montoni Research Fellow at the McKim School of Business at Northeastern University. She is also a research fellow at Cornell University's Smith Family Business Initiative. Eddleston has been recognized as one of the world's leading family business and entrepreneurship scholars, as noted in Small Business Economics, also the European Journal of Family Business, and also Journal of Family Business Strategy. Her research focuses on family business and the careers of entrepreneurs, and she's particularly known for her research that explores how the family can be a resource or constraint to the family business, and how family businesses can remain innovative through the generations. Professor has served as associated editor of the Journal of Business Venturing and the Journal on Family Business Strategy. And of course, she is a senior editor for the Entrepreneurship Innovation Exchange and also the founding editor of FamilyBusiness.org, where we have worked together, which has been wonderful. At Northeastern, she teaches a family business course for next-gen family members and also an honors course titled Examining Family Business Through Film. She is a fellow of the Family Firm Institute and also the U.S. Association of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And finally, her research has accumulated over 20,000 citations, ranking her in the top 2% of scientists in the field by Stanford University. Kim, that's just awesome. It's wonderful to have you today, and it's been great working with you and also Professor Matt Hughes in the past. Why don't we start off just saying, what are you working on right now and what's keeping you busy? And then we'll jump into some Q&A as well.
So what I'm working on right now, there's always a lot of things being juggled, but usually it's really trying to better understand the role of the family in family business survival, performance, more and more looking at it from a family science perspective. So a lot of the early research really took a more strategy approach. And now it's probably understanding, what are the ways the family contribute to success? When are they more of a hindrance, if you will? Some of it looking at the differences in emerging or transitioning economies, understanding family dynamics, and things like that.
I got that. Thank you. You cover a very wide range of material. Let's start with the family as a strategic force versus a constraint, because you've explored how the family can act as both an asset and also a constraint. Let's talk about how families can better discern when their involvement actually is accelerating growth or whether they get in the way of their own entrepreneurship.
I think this is a great question, and I wish more families would actually, assess this of themselves, right? That they would actually look and think, are we actually contributing? Are we important to our family business's success, or are we holding it back? So I think a family, if they were going to first think about, are we contributing to the business for good, right? I think some of it is understanding also how they're unique. So sometimes it might be their values, which that would be important for a family, obviously actively involved. But even if the family were more passive shareholders or only on the board but not involved in management, they could still be this really important force for a business if their values were kind of guiding the strategy. So lots of different ways, but how important is the family's values to the business, its success, its longevity? Another thing would be looking at, for example, the family's commitment and dedication. I always like to see, are the family members role models? Are they really setting the tone for the business? That tacit knowledge and the understanding of the business. And that, of course, is what makes family businesses so unique and many times does give the next gen and successors an edge because they grow up in the business, they grow up in the industry, and they have so much knowledge. And then, of course, it's using it and using it for strategy and decision making. And then another way might be the family might be really important to the business because of all the social capital and goodwill and trust they've built with different business associates and the ability to make the handshake deals and even being strong forces in the community. So those are the kinds of things I would look at to say, okay, if the family has these things, they're a force for good. They're key to the competitive advantage of the business. Now, if I was going to look at the other side, right, alternatively, is my family maybe hurting the business? Are they an hindrance? Some of the things I would look for is I always try and see, like, is the business becoming a welfare institution? So, are there any family members who have jobs that don't need doing? Or even worse, family members on payroll who don't even contribute. They don't work for the business, yet they're on payroll and somehow gaining financially. And of course, when that's happening, that also means there's not money to put towards innovation, marketing, and so forth. I also want to look at their attitudes. So, a big one is the sense of entitlement. So, what is their attitude to the business? Do they look at the business as something that owes them something? It's a source of wealth. Or are they looking at the business as something a source of their identity, something to contribute to, something that holds the family business together and they have pride in. So definitely a sense of entitlement. I'm trying to think anything else. Any kind of family members who, if they weren't family, they wouldn't be there. Maybe they would have been fired. They would have never been hired for a position. They're making more money at the family business than they would at another job, another similar job at a different business. Those are the kinds of things you can look at. And eventually, if you don't tackle those issues, the business will either, become stagnant, it could even decline, and eventually it could actually go out of business.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. I love that. And I'm glad you brought up the values. And as you know, I wrote about that with Professor Matt Hughes in August 12th of 2023 with the article with your platform called How Family Can Run Their Businesses with Both Head and Heart, talking about the long-term strategies with, effective emotional intelligence. So glad you brought up values, and the values also ties directly to legacy. And I want to talk a bit about legacy with you on this call. But thank you for talking about the different types of wealth. Obviously, there's the soft wealth and the hard wealth. Let's talk about the Fredo effect. Can you unpack this concept of the Fredo effect as well, so our listeners can understand that?
Sure, and I'll also mention that that article I absolutely love, and I actually share it in my next generation class. So if people haven't taken a look at it, I think it's a great way too to kind of have some self-reflection, right, as a family. So I'm glad you shared that. Thanks, Adam. So the Fredo effect. So um, just to define it first, it's basically a family member who's an impediment to the business. They only have a job because of their last name, and anyone else would have been fired. And when I first started researching it, and I do workshops on the Fredo effect too for the Centers for Family Businesses and Families, and it's a taboo topic. It's a very difficult topic. And I should mention part of it, it was inspired by one of my family's businesses. I grew up in a family with multiple family businesses. At one time, we had 9. And one of them that was actually the inspiration for much of my research on the family being a resource to the business, the stewards of the business. They were this utopian family. And then a child, a third generation member, ruined everything. And I thought, if this could happen to this family, it could happen really to anybody. And that's what pushed me to start studying it. But in particular, when it came to talking to families, it's a taboo topic. No one wants to talk about, their drunk son, their daughter who doesn't show up to work, and, everything she does, she ruins, she messes it up. People have to clean up her mess all the time. I thought it needed a little bit of humor. I thought it needed something also to humanize it. And so Fredo is from The Godfather, and he's he's actually the second born son who is stepped over for Michael to take over. But if you watch part 1 and part 2 of The Godfather, you'll see that he was never meant for that business. And everything he does, he causes problems and he even sabotages the family. And so, it humanized it. So when I do my academic research, I usually won't refer to Fredo. It's more when I'm working with practitioners or giving a workshop, again, to humanize it, to give a little, just, add a little bit of humor to something that's so hard to talk about. Also, something so families don't know, you know, um, they know they're not alone, that it's something that's common. In my research, one of the studies we did to kind of really get at it, we actually found that 33% of the families we surveyed admitted to having someone there, a family member, who was really only there because they were family, that they hurt the business, they caused problems for the business, and we use the word impediment. They were an impediment to the business.
Right.
So it's a real problem.
Right. So on that point, I think it's a very tricky issue when you're preparing these larger businesses for sale or to merge them or buy and sell them, as I have over the years, because there's a lot of both emotional and financial weight in preparation for large events. So I think the point you're making is important, which is as you're going to these big inflection points in your lives and creating wealth in the sale of a company or asset or a big transition, is to make sure that the family enterprise, the family board, the owners really clarify the organizational structure and put people in their places of best leadership and best practices, right? What their best and highest use. Um, we've talked a lot about legacy on the show, and also some additional papers with you as well. We won't have a lot of time for that today, but maybe we can revisit it in the future, and that connection between the efficiency of the organization and their effectiveness in leadership decision making. Um, we can talk a bit of now about this organizational imprinting, as you call it, which is the values and decisions of leaders that shape, let's say, the direction of a firm and the legacy over time. Can you talk about that organizational imprinting, and how do these legacies really endure, and how do they need to pivot as conditions change in their industry or global competition, or even organizational structure? So kind of that connection between the legacy of the core original company and the evolution of that legacy as it affects the leadership and organizational structure.
So imprinting effect, family and non-family firms, is incredibly, incredibly strong. There's even been research that showed that a founder's imprint has as much impact on decision making in a firm in the first generation as it does in the third and the fourth generation, which also goes to tell you the important role of the founders and a founding team. And they really do have to think about, the importance of articulating values, who they are. And it's not just saying a value, giving words. Like, I've noticed a lot of firms will talk about things like integrity or honesty, but it also means when you're teaching employees and the next gen about this, you actually have to include storytelling. You have to give examples. So, what does integrity mean? Give me an example of how you displayed integrity. Give me an example of where you made a really difficult decision in order to uphold that value, that integrity. But the founders can have this amazing effect on things like, the mission. So another one that's important to include is things like innovation, the willingness to change, because when the next gen is in that position of making decisions, sometimes there is a natural resistance to change. They think changing strategy or the portfolio of products they sell is like spitting on grandma or grandpa's grave. And, if you don't change and innovate, your competitors will make you obsolete. So it's really, really important that the founders think about, you know, what role do they want their values and their mission to be in 30 years from now? What are those guiding forces? And then it is upon that next generation when they come in to reassess it, to think about, well, what does this mean? How can I make it my own? So I always love the story of Zildjian. They're one of the oldest family, they are the oldest family business, sorry, in America, because they weren't founded in America. They were founded in Constantinople. And they make cymbals, like drum cymbals. And the whole business was started, I think it was in the 1600s, by an alchemist who was hired by royalty, the emperor, to create gold. And obviously, you can't create gold, but when he was doing that and combining different metals and alloy, he realized it created different sounds. And what's very neat is that to this day, the family uses this idea of searching for gold to underscore their constant search for change and innovation. And they just came up with a new product that they actually call the alchemy, where it's an electronic drum set. But this whole idea of reassessing, what do these values mean? How do we keep the founder's legacy alive, but also make it our own and adapt it to modern times and what it needs? And I think we do definitely need to put more focus on that, and even helping that next generation to see that making a legacy their own is actually um, a way to respect the founder and the founding generation and to keep it alive. And it also helps with gaining the commitment of the next generation, which I think is very important.
Okay. Thank you. That's wonderful. We have talked about next gen and legacy connection on the show with some of your colleagues in the industry, Jim Grubman and Valerie Golinskaya, Chelsea Toller, Emily Bouchard. We've covered this topic, and it's tricky because, as I say, the legacy is really what you make it, and it's very important to sculpt that legacy as you're talking about and improve it, right? And be nimble and improve and adapt for decades or even hundreds of years. And then at the same time, there's a point when a company really is going to transition and sell, and that is going to create a lot of wealth, and that legacy needs to live on. So I think it's important that everybody, including practitioners and academics, keep in mind that the legacy goes beyond the the internal adjusting, but it can live, beyond the company actually being an independent force, because that does create a significant wealth, right? And the brand also can continue to thrive under somebody else's watch. So on that note, just two more items. Let's talk about that approach to legacy and the evolution of let's say the entrepreneurial animal of a large family business cross culturally, because you have led initiatives globally, and I'd love to hear like what you view as the more striking cultural differences you've observed within family enterprises, especially this area of succession and legacy.
I think it's so interesting, cross-cultural differences. And yes, I do some research on it because I find it, there's so much we can learn too, from other cultures and how even the way their families are managed, the way they handle succession. But some of the things I often see, particularly because I do teach a next gen class at Northeastern with next gen or heirs from around the globe. This past semester, I had 5 students from publicly held companies. They're, I mean, mom and pops all the way to, some of the largest companies in the world. And I get to see a lot of what they're dealing with. In addition, and it always adds nice context to my research. 'Cause I do a lot of research, but until you hear it in their own voices, that's what really brings it alive. So different things like certainly the firstborn male, primogeniture. Oh, that is alive and well in many parts of the world. That's just, there's still issues with, for example, whether women can have a role, whether women can even own shares and what that's going to be. So we see very, very big differences with that. What's always interesting to me too is in certain cultures, firstborn male, especially when there's been a divorce or there's even multiple wives, like who is the firstborn male? And that will be debated. I find that very interesting. In some families, they live together with aunts and uncles, and they have brother cousins. And this idea of who is family is very, very different from one culture to another. Another issue I see is very, very important is filial piety, which is particularly in Asian countries where it's this deference and respect for the elders, which I wish my children had. But it's very unique because when it comes to the next generation joining a business and starting to be peers with their elders, their fathers, their grandfathers, grandmothers, and this ability to be comfortable sharing and giving ideas and second guessing something or questioning something or speaking up. They're raised in a culture where that's not appropriate. And that's becoming a major problem that I've seen them in workshops they're trying to deal with too, but it's ingrained in their culture. And so it is upon the older generation to kind of ask the next generation for their ideas, their perspectives, and for them to feel comfortable with that, which is obviously going to be very, very important in the succession processes. The last one I find incredibly interesting is, China had that one child policy, and now we are going to see a bunch of young women taking over these incredibly large, successful businesses, which we've never seen. We've never seen that around the globe, and they're still young. It's probably within maybe the next like 8 to 10 years, but that is going to be incredibly interesting to watch and study and to see all the and they are many of them are doing an amazing job preparing these women for leadership through education, through experience. And I just can't wait to see what happens and hopefully learn from it and learn from some lessons we can take here to America and Europe and abroad.
Thank you for that. I do like the evolution of the family enterprise industry becoming more sophisticated and looking global, despite the challenges in globalization, which creates a lot of competition and also creates some, I guess, some nationalist um, tendencies, right? When we think about how we build a company in America versus Europe, but as you said, it's super important to draw analogies across border. I think particularly between the American and European nexus. On another article that I wrote with you all, with Matt Hughes back in November 2023, we talked about these different succession planning preparations and to share with the next gen the values, not just the money, and create different attitudes about respect and the effort and the grit and the sacrifices that went in building that wealth, right, is super important to the next gen, so they appreciate the investment and sacrifices and time, not just the wealth itself as an objective asset. Um, so lastly, looking at the global economy, different sectors, and spanning, let's say, academia and private enterprise, just there's such a large industry growth rate and like fragmentation, I think, in the family office and family enterprise space So it's very important work that you all do at Northeastern and Cornell, Smith Center, and also FamilyBusiness.org, and podcasts like ours, because there's just endless amounts of information, and it's evolving so quickly. So the last topic I would ask is really maybe just share a bit of your optimism for the next generation of family leaders. What do you think is really in their court, and what are they doing well, and like how does the perspective, especially the evolving Gen Zs, what do you think are the drivers of some of the optimism that you see in the industry?
So I think one of the most important things is there's much more emphasis on education of the next gen. So whether it's through the workshops and the conferences and the different organizations and podcasts like yours too, who are trying to educate. And so there's a lot more attention to that. And so I think the next gen and families now see that they're not alone. Their experiences aren't alone. They're not unique. That there's a lot to learn and a lot of ways to prepare. One of the major advantages of being a family business, of course, is that ability to prepare the next generation. The tacit knowledge that they grow up being surrounded in a business and in an industry, it's you can't compete with it. You honestly can't. And then on top of it, when they have the dedication and the identity with the business, if you take all of those, you're just setting yourself up for success and hopefully to create a this dynasty one day. Um, so I see that. I see, the children who come to my class and will say things like, I'm going to take this business to the next level, or they look at it with such honor and grace, and they appreciate everything their parents and grandparents have built, and they see it as an honor, this ability to join it and be a part of it. One thing I have to mention though that we are learning that all of us need to keep in mind is the age of maturity is a lot later than it was for my generation. So what we're learning is where we were at 19, they are at about age 25, 26. And I think that's a really important point to make with the older generation when they look at them and they say things like, well, this is what I was doing at his age or her age. I owned my first house. I did this. We can't really make those comparisons. So what that also means, because I get calls and emails from the parents sometimes, is that it's okay for the younger generation in their 20s to maybe want to do something for at first. They're not quite sure if they want to join, because that is the time when they should be learning their independence and their own personal value, and their identity. And then, if you've taught them to appreciate the business and all that it has and the legacy and the values, they do come back. And honestly, you only want the ones to come back who are going to contribute anyway. You never want to make it an obligation. Am I right? And that's something actually I see in some foreign countries. But
That's a good one. That's a good point to
yeah,
emphasize. Yeah, that
so, we've got to be a little patient with them. I do see that they tend to come around. 2 weeks ago, I had one of my students contact me from several years ago, and he's helping the family business to go public. And when he was in my class, he used to always say, I don't think I'm going to join it. I don't want to join it. And now he's right he's not CEO, but he's in a leadership position and incredibly excited and a part of it. So sometimes it's that evolution. We've got to be a little bit patient with them, but we're doing a good job, and we want the ones though who are going to contribute. We don't want the ones we want to give them a choice. And there are other ways though. We have to make sure they know that even if they're not in the business, they're still in the family and they're valued and they're loved and they feel a part of that, which is fine. And I'm sure I know you have other podcasts where you talk about that and family councils and so forth and family offices. So I leave that for you to give some suggestions, Adam.
Thank you. That's a great way to wrap up. I love the reference to the broader family capital. We see that at the Ultra High Net Worth Institute and the wheel of family capital, right? That the legends have created. alongside people like you. I also want to give a shout out to familybusiness.org, which is a wonderful website, one of the largest in the world. And also, Kim is also involved in, of course, Cornell University has an incredible center, as well as at Northeastern University. And then finally, a shout out to her sponsors and partners at Schulze, at the EIX, which is the sister company of familybusiness.org. I've long admired your work, and as you know, we've had Alfredo Damascus and Matt Hughes and Massimo Bao and others alongside you on the show as super brilliant writers and academics and thinkers. So I really created a show to share that thought leadership to the broader community. And it's really been wonderful, and everyone learns a lot. So it's great to finally have you on the show, and I enjoy working with you and writing for you. It's been a pleasure. I actually have an article for you coming up with Matthews again, so we'll get on that. Just really congratulations on everything you do. Maybe just one more minute on what is your definition of legacy, and then we'll wrap it
Oh,
up.
that's a tough one. You're gonna leave with a tough question, Adam. But also, I should mention, thank you for everything you do. As everything I mentioned about the importance of education and learning, you're central to it. Whether you're writing articles or through this podcast, it is people like you who are helping family businesses to thrive and survive, and healthy family, healthy business, right? Um, so legacy. What my personal definition would be, I there's different components to it, but certainly it's this idea of something living on beyond you. And the values, the missions, it's probably a little bit, it's the emotions, it's a bit intangible, but it's this idea of creating something and building something that the next gen and the generations after you will want to be a part of, will uphold, and make the world a better place.
Perfect. You nailed that one. It's great to have you today on the show. Kim Eddleston, global expert, academic writer, thought leader, professor, contributor. Wonderful to have you on the show and watch you continue to create so much value in the industry. Really enjoyed having you today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Adam, and I look forward to seeing that next article from you.
Fantastic. This is Artem Smith signing off. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the Family Business Audiocast, available live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and X.